Hello, everybody. Tom McHale here, host of the Constitution Show, brought to you by the American Constitutional Rights Union, protecting the constitutional rights of all Americans. The purpose of this series is simple. We want to explain the Constitution and constitutional issues in a way so simple, even a career politician can understand it. Now, with that said, let's get to today's show. We're going to define the basic contents of the original Constitution. In later episodes, we'll talk about all of the Bill of Rights and all of the subsequent amendments. But for now, we're going to focus just on a quick walkthrough of the original document. Now, don't worry, we're going to kind of breeze through the various articles within the Constitution, but we will come back in future shows and do a dedicated show on each one of the 7 primary articles. With that said, let's get started. First of all, you might notice in the footnote here that the Constitution is a very short document, considering what it does. It's our national owner's manual, but it's only about 4,379 words, depending on how you count it. That's not much. Now, let's start walking through this. The first article defines the legislative branch of our government. It is by far the most comprehensive, with about 2,266 words. Over half of the document is allocated to the legislative branch, the definition of, the powers of, and how people can get elected to the House of Representatives or the Senate. The founders viewed this as the most important part of the Constitution itself. Laws should be deliberated, they should be argued over, and we should require agreement and compromise and all of these things to make sure that we come up with a good result. So when we get frustrated by all the bickering and infighting in Congress, it's kind of by design, right, wrong, or indifferent. Now, Article 2 goes into the executive branch. This is the managerial side of the Constitution. Think of you're a manager of a Taco Bell. You can't just wake up one morning and decide, hey, we're going to start selling gyros. That's a decision that is passed down from above, from a higher power, kind of like our legislative branch passes things down to the executive branch. Policies, procedures, and laws that the executive branch implements and enforces. So you'll find things in Article 2 define the office of the president and vice president, how a president can be punished or even removed from office, and things like that. But again, we'll get into the details of that in a future show. Article 3 covers our legal system and the judicial branch structure. Now, it doesn't just define the Supreme Court itself, it actually defines the national court system. Lower courts, and we're all familiar with how cases work their way up through the system to the Supreme Court in about 80 times per year. However, this article also allows for direct filing of certain types of cases with the Supreme Court. Things involving foreign treaties, for example, or disputes between states and things like that. Article 4, but when you start reading this one, it looks a little bit like founder Greek word salad. But basically, what it defines is how states have to work together and respect each other's laws. States do have the power in our system, more so than the federal government, or they're supposed to, but they do have to play nicely together under the Constitution. For example, while states can make their own laws, things have to be consistent. We wouldn't want to have to get a driver's license in South Carolina and take a class and get a whole new driver's license when we go to Florida. So that's kind of what Article 4 is all about. It also gets into defining how crime is recognized across state lines. While ordinances vary, if I'm convicted of porch piracy in South Carolina, I can't run off to Florida to escape the consequences. Florida will recognize that as a crime and send me right back. Article 5 talks about how to change the rules. Even though the Constitution is really defined as timeless principles, the founders recognize that we may want to change some things over time, and we have. A couple of ways this can be done. Congress can do it. Both the House of Representatives and Senate, if they each arrive at a 2/3 agreement on a constitutional amendment, they can put that forth. Now, it still has to be ratified by 3/4 of the states, but we all know 2/3 of Congress can't agree on what to have for lunch in the cafeteria. So the other way that that can happen is 2/3 of the states outside of Washington, D.C. jurisdiction can decide on calling a constitutional convention and putting forth proposed amendments. Again, those have to be ratified by 3/4, 75% of the states before they take effect. That doesn't happen very often. Now, Article 6 kind of describes the Constitution as the law of the land. It is the supreme law. While states can set their own policies and laws and ordinances and things like that, they do have to be constitutional under the United States Constitution. For example, one state couldn't say, hey, we're not going to allow women to vote. Clearly, that is a natural right that is protected under the federal Constitution. So that's what Article 6 is all about. Article 7, kind of interesting, a little bit of an exception, one-time rule for ratifying the Constitution itself. And back then, there were only 13 states. And as you recall, 75% of states have to ratify a constitutional amendment, which would really be 10, which is more than 3/4 of 13 states. So at that time, they wrote into the Constitution itself that it would be ratified if 9 states or 69% of all states at the time agreed on ratification. And they did. So there we have it. There's our quick walkthrough. Again, we were brief and kind of breezed through some of those, but we're going to come back to each one and kind of drill into that in much more detail. In the meantime, if you want more information, visit theacru.org. You can find the original founding documents there. And if you want more of this content, hit the subscribe and like buttons, and we will be back with you next time.